Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending this event. The Windows Management User Group are delighted to be able to present an afternoon with Wally Mead from Microsoft on System Center Configuration Manager 2007. Our agenda today, after I've done the welcome and the introductions, Wally will start with a session on site deployment, then we'll have a brief break, then Wally will then do the second session on client deployment, we'll then have another quick break, then Wally will give an overview on Configuration Manager Service Pack 1 and R2, with a Q&A session at the end, and we're aiming to finish around the 6 o'clock mark. For those of you that don't know, have never heard of the Windows Management User Group before, in 2006, a few of us that are passionate about management on the Windows platform got together and created the group. So I'll just do some introductions to the members of the group that are here today, the community leaders. Rob Marshall, who's an SMS and configuration management consultant. Gordon McKenna, who's a Microsoft MVP and operations manager. David Scambler, who's also a consultant for SMS and config manager. David Allen, who unfortunately can't be with us today. And definitely least, myself. I'm Cliff Hobbs and I'm an MVP in Configuration Manager. We like to try and hold our meetings bi-monthly. At the moment we're alternating between here at TVP and Cardinal Place in London. But we are open to other venues. I mean, we do realise that, you know, there is more to the UK than just the south of England. So if you guys have travelled away, Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, and you would like us to do an event there, then just get in touch and we'll see what we can organise for you. One of the key things about our meetings is just not having someone from Microsoft up here doing a sales pitch. One of the key things we want to promote, and based on the feedback it's what you want, is you want to hear from third-party vendors. You also want lots of breaks so you can do networking and learn from each other, real-world experiences, and hearing our experiences as well, and also covering not just the Microsoft products that manage the Windows platform, so what have the third-party vendors got to offer. So the reason I'm guessing most of you are here today, the most important question, how do you get the swag? Well, yes, we do have swag, courtesy of Wally, and this is how you get it. When you came in, you should have all been given 3 pieces of coloured paper. If you haven't got them, don't worry. You can get them from me or any of the guys here. And basically, all we're going to do is we're going to give you a set of these for each session and then one for the event overall. All you need to do is decide, was the event or that particular session a complete waste of time? Do a red one. If it was okay, mediocre, give us a yellow one. If it was absolutely brilliant, which I'm sure all of you are going to say, give us a green one. Just put your name, your email address, and any comments you've got on the form, on this card. It would also help us if you could just indicate how you heard about the event, if it was through the WMUG website, through your TAM, word of mouth, some other way, just so we can track, you know, areas that we might be missing. Then at the end of each session, give your cards back to one of us. At the end of the event, we'll literally just shuffle up all the ones that we've had returned, and we'll do a draw, and then you can come up and choose from the swag. Can I also remind everyone that if you've got mobiles, can you put them on silent? Future events. One of the key ways we're tracking our mailing list is by you registering on the WMUG website. So please, if you could all do that, that would be great. We don't pass on your details to anybody else. I'm vehemently against that because I hate getting spam and I get far too much of it. I get far too many emails anyway. But yeah, that's the way that we like to track things. And also give us feedback. What do you want to see at future events? Where, when, what sort of topics? So, without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Wally Mead from Microsoft. Thanks, Wally.
I think I'm on now. Well, thank you very much, Cliff. One thing Cliff mentioned is sales pitches for Microsoft. You ain't going to get that from me. Well, good. I'm glad we're on the same page there. People ask me all the time about licensing of our product, etc., and I don't know. I don't know how our product's licensed. I don't know how Configuration Manager is licensed. This is going to sound wrong, but I don't care. It has nothing to do with what I do. You guys, you're business people, you worry about that stuff and go on from there. So I don't know. I don't know what our product costs. I don't know anything about the licensing model. It's outside what I do. So, contrary to what the slide says, my name is not Wally, because I know Wally's not a good name around here. So y'all can call me Walter, which is my real official legal name, but no, I don't care. You can call me Wally. First time I was in the UK was in the 90s, and I was teaching SMS, I don't know, 1 point something class. And every time somebody said my name, the whole classroom laughed. And nobody told me why till the last day of the class. And then somebody went to actually one of the bookstores and got one of those Where's Wally books and gave me one of those. In the States, they're called Where's Waldo. So that gave me a clue as to what Wally meant around here. So when it came the second time, I was with some buddies, and we were doing a Train the Trainer presentation, and the one guy with me, he knew that Wally wasn't a good name, so he called me Walter. And every time he said Walter, I'm looking around who he's talking to. And, oh, I guess you mean me. So anyway, thank you all for attending, and hopefully you find this afternoon worthwhile. Cliff had asked me to come, been begging me for years to come, but finally it worked out on my way to Barcelona for next week to stop off and do some presentations. And we were going back and forth on what he wanted me to present this afternoon, and he asked me what I was doing in Barcelona, and I said I'm doing these two presentations. The third one I'm actually not doing, Jeff Wetlaufer's doing. And so he said, well, why don't you do those here? Because not everybody at the user group meeting will be going to Barcelona next week for Tech at IT Forum. So that's what I'm doing. It may be stuff you guys are familiar with. It may be presentations you've seen before. If so, I apologize. Maybe you'll hear me say something different this time than you heard me say before. I don't know. I'll just try and do my best. So if you do happen to go to Barcelona next week, you may not want to sit in my presentations because you've all seen them today. And the third presentation, the last one of the day on SP1 and R2, is actually our marketing lead is delivering that presentation. So he wanted me to ensure that I was telling you guys that that's what he's presenting next week as well. So just be aware of that. So anyway, I've been with Microsoft for 16 and a half years or something like that. When I started with Microsoft, I was in the training group, and I developed training courses, and one of the very first training courses I got involved with was SMS 1.0. So I'd worked with SMS ever since 1.0 before it was a product, back when it was codenamed Hermes yet. So we didn't know a version name or a public name yet, so we called it Hermes. And then helped develop the courses on 1.1, 1.2, 2.0. Then after 2.0, when the Y2K scare came around, I left the training group and went to PSS for a year, trained support engineers on configuration manager, on SMS 2.0. And then I moved to the product group. So I've been with the product group since mid-2000 and been doing various different roles in there. But I'm a senior program manager, which just means I have a lot of white and gray on my facial hair. And I'm a community lead. So if you go up on the TechNet forums for Configuration Manager, you might see me up there responding to posts. So I do a lot of that work, do presentations. I do develop hands-on labs. If you go to Barcelona for IT Forum, or if you've been to MMS and done any of the hands-on labs, those are generally things I would develop. So that's why I get invited to do presentations, because I do a lot of them. Not necessarily very well, but I do a lot of them, and I'm not afraid of being up in front of people or in front of a camera. There's no camera here, but not afraid of being recorded. Every once in a while, I'll probably say something and say, oops, I probably shouldn't have said that because I'm being recorded, but I'm a little more transparent than some other people from Microsoft might be as well. I think so. At any point in time, you got questions, feel free to ask your questions. You don't even have to raise your hand if you don't want to. I probably won't see them anyway, but just feel free to shout out your questions. I'll do my best to end this. We're starting late, so I may not end at the 2:30 that we were planning on, but we'll do our best to get you out of here by 6, and you got 15-minute breaks in there as well. So anyway, what I'm going to cover next week and what I'm going to cover right now for you is here's the agenda: prerequisites for deploying System Center Configuration Manager. So this first presentation is getting your site deployed, ready for clients. And the second presentation, the part 2, is deploying clients. So this one is how do you get your environment ready for Configuration Manager? How do you go about the actual deployment process? Once you've got your site installed, what are some of the common configuration things you're going to do in your site to get it prepared for clients? So we'll talk about deploying site systems, configuring boundaries as your scope of management in your environment, and then a few considerations, things to be aware of if you're an SMS 2003 customer looking at migrating to Configuration Manager. So talk a little bit about side-by-side upgrade or install versus in-place upgrade and so on. All right, so I'm assuming everybody in here is SMS knowledgeable, so I'm going with that assumption. And I may happen to slip into saying SMS v4. If I say SMS v4, that's Configuration Manager. That's what the code name was for it internally, was SMS v4. So if I do say SMS v4, that means Configuration Manager. I very seldom say SMS v3 because we never had a version 3 of the product. It was SMS 2003, which is actually v2.5. But if I do happen to say v3, that's what our product group calls SMS 2003. So this first slide is some of the changes that we have in the product compared to SMS 2003 as far as deployment goes. New site systems, SMS 2003 supported Windows 2000 servers and then on up through Windows Server 2003. SMS 2003 does not support Windows 2008 as a site system. Configuration Manager has newer platforms, so we don't support Windows 2000 as a server for site systems. We require Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 1, Service Pack 2, the R2 releases, or Windows Server 2008 as a site system, provided you're running our SP1 version. And these slides are traditionally talking about our as of Service Pack 1. So if there's something unique in RTM version, I'll point that out. If you do want to have, Active Directory schema. So in the upgraded Active Directory schema, there is a new version of the schema for Configuration Manager as opposed to SMS 2003. So if you are an SMS 2003 shop, you have your schema extended for SMS 2003, you are going to need to upgrade that schema for v4 or Configuration Manager. If you want to do, oops, wrong button, sorry. If you want to do NAP, you have to upgrade the schema. You can't do network access protection without having the Configuration Manager version of Active Directory schema. That is the one thing that's absolutely, you cannot work around any other way. All the other stuff in Configuration Manager can work around having either no schema extended or a SMS 2003 schema. We publish new site systems there, and I'll show you what later on we publish. FQDN publishing, versioning, and site capabilities, which are really important for client deployment. So I'll talk more about that in the Part 2 presentation coming up. Platform support, I already talked about the drop Windows 2000 server support. We do support Windows Server 2008 for site systems with the SP1 release of our product. We do have Hyper-V support, so if you want to go ahead and utilize Hyper-V now, you can Hyper-V your entire environment now. All your site systems, all the site system roles, your entire client platform if you want to. You can also do so in Virtual Server 2005 R2 environment. Now, in the past, we've never supported VMware. I know a lot of customers that use VMware for the virtualization technology, and we never supported it. However, I heard just last week that with this new, some sort of virtualization technology platform or program we come up with, we're now apparently supporting VMware as well. So apparently VMware is now on that list, which I just found out about last week. One of the very cool things that people like about Configuration Manager in the deployment process is the prerequisite checker. So in SMS 2.0 or SMS 2003, you'd launch our setup program, you'd get through the setup program, you'd click OK to go ahead and finish the install, we'd bomb and say, sorry, SQL Server's wrong version. So you'd have to exit, set up, you'd have to go upgrade your SQL Server, maybe reboot your server, you then go back and run setup again, we bomb. Oh, your operating system service pack wasn't correct. So you have to exit setup, go upgrade, reboot, and do the same thing again. Maybe numerous different times. So now we have a prereq checker that I'll show you that will actually allow you to evaluate your site server and MP and SQL Server box before you even try and run setup to let you know, hey, SQL's the wrong version, your OS is not supported, you don't have AD scheme extensions installed, you can't deploy patches because you don't have WSUS installed. So we'll tell you all those things ahead of time. So you don't have to start setup, find out during setup, exit, and do a bunch of stuff. Now you do all that stuff first, get everything set up the way you want it, then you go ahead and run setup one time, and theoretically it works for you. And I'll show you the prereq checker here momentarily. And then site deployment progress. One of the other bad things about installing SMS 2003 was we put that little dialog that said, hey, we're installing now, and you saw this progress bar, it just went back and forth, and is it really doing anything? Is it just stuck in a loop we're just cycling through? You had no idea. Then finally we'd end, say, hey, you're all done, you click OK. Then you go launch your admin console. What would happen? You couldn't see status. Not everything was registered yet because all setup did was launch off the install Site Component Manager, which then installed some other stuff. So setup ended when Site Component Manager got installed, but we weren't really installed. So it took another 15 minutes before we were really done installing. So it was kind of a lag time there. When can I really use the product? In the Configuration Manager product, when setup's done, tells you it's done, it is done. In fact, we have a checkbox there. You can launch the admin console from setup directly. So we give you real good information as to where we are in the setup progress, not how long it's going to take yet to get done, but at least we give you some idea, and when it's done, it really is done. So you can immediately launch the console and start doing your work. So some of the prerequisites to be aware of, I mentioned the OS, Windows Server 2003, Service Pack 1 or later. So Service Pack 1, Service Pack 2, the R2 release, and then again if you're running with our Service Pack 1 release, which hopefully everybody is, then we do support Windows Server 2008 for all site system roles. SQL Server 2005 Service Pack 2, nothing prior to that. So 2005 Service Pack 2, and we just announced support for SQL 2008. In the last month, I think it was, we announced that support. Now, officially, we don't support SQL 2008 yet with the R2 add-on. So we've not announced support yet for R2 with SQL Server 2008. There are a couple of hotfixes, or there's one hotfix you'll have to install if you're going to use SQL 2008. And they're noted up on the website. I forget it off the top of my head. It's something like 955.262. It's a hotfix you have to install to support SQL 2008. And I've heard there will be another one for R2. So to utilize the R2 features, I think it's for the reporting services point I'll talk about later on today. There's a hotfix required for it. So if you want to use SQL Server 2008, you are going to have to apply at least one hotfix for that. Assume you have to have IIS. The vast majority of our site system roles require IIS now. So just assume that's the case. .NET Framework 2.0 or later, MMC 3.0. Yes, it still is an MMC-based console, which I know can be a pain, but that's what we're living with. So we do require MMC 3.0. If you run Windows Server 2003 SP1, it doesn't get installed automatically, so it was a separate add-on you had to install. Now with the new OS, it's installed automatically. And then a big change. Oh, go ahead.
Just a quick one. Obviously, you mentioned about the Windows Server 2008 support. So does the IMS stand for the IMS 7?
Mm-hmm. Yes, IIS, we do support version 7 for Windows Server 2008. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, obviously nobody's going to be dissatisfied with the presentations because Cliff said red and this is pink. So he said to fill out the red form if you're unhappy. So I'm going to see no red forms coming up here later on. So I'm safe. A big change between SMS 2003 and Configuration Manager is that last bullet. In SMS 2003, we were able to ship everything you needed on our CD, which back then it was a CD and now it's a DVD, on the CD to install clients. That doesn't happen anymore. Microsoft has changed some internal policies. We're not allowed to ship a lot of external non-Configuration Manager-based products on our DVD, which now it is a DVD. It's a little over a gig in size. So you have to have some method of downloading these client components as part of Configuration Manager setup. So during setup, as you'll see later on in a few minutes, we're going to ask you, does your site server have internet access? If so, we're going to go up to the internet. We're going to find these, I think it's 85 components, about 80 megabytes of disk space it consumes, and download those components over the wire. If your site server computer doesn't have internet access, then you can pre-download these components on some other box that does have internet access, make them available to your site server, and point your site server install to those components. Now, they're not involved with installing a site server at all, but they're there to stage on the management point, which is involved with installing your clients. So I'll show you that. Service Pack 1 specifics. Again, we support Windows Server 2008 for all site system roles. In the RTM version of our product, you can only use Windows Server 2008 for a system health validator, which was network access protection. No support for server core. So you cannot use a core install of server as a Configuration Manager site system. It has to be the full-blown version of server. And I think I mentioned it, but for reference, SMS 2003 is not planned to ever have Windows Server 2008 support for site systems. So you're going to be stuck on the Windows 2000 to Windows Server 2003 OSs for servers in SMS 2003. If you want to support Windows Server 2008, you're going to Configuration Manager.
So what about the console on 2008 servers?
The console on 2008 servers is supported, yes. Yes. So if you look at the supported configurations doc up on the website for Service Pack 3, it will list the fact that we do support Windows Server 2008 as a client, including the admin console. Correct. If you want to do patching through SMS, so in SMS 2003 you had ITMU. In Configuration Manager we don't really use ITMU anymore. We have it for supporting SMS 2003 clients, but not for Config Manager. Config Manager, we now use WSUS 3.0. So if you want to do your patch processing through Configuration Manager, you have to have WSUS 3.0 Service Pack 1 on a box, and then your site server has to have the admin console for WSUS 3.0 on the site server, because we use what we call APIs, or the SDK, to communicate between the site server and the WSUS box if it's remote. So you do have to have WSUS 3.0. The rest of the prerequisites are pretty much the same. There are two specific hotfixes that might be required, that are required if you want to utilize the AMT out-of-band management technology. And we'll talk about that more in the last presentation of the day, but with SP1 we support Intel vPro AMT chipsets, where you can do some what we call out-of-band management technology. You can launch off a little console, you can reboot these guys remotely, you can power them up remotely, get information from them when they're turned off. To do that, there's two hotfixes. One of those is what's called an S-channel hotfix, and the other one is a new version of Windows Remote Management, which is how we do this, version 1.1. So those two are required, and the prereq checker will flag those for you if they're not installed with Service Pack 1. There are warnings, which means you don't have to have them, but if you're going to use the AMT support, you do have to have them. And then there's two new site system roles in Service Pack 1 that both require specific certificates. So if you want to do this out-of-band support for Intel AMT, there's a specific Intel AMT certificate that Intel provisions on their boxes, and you have to have a Microsoft CA to interface with that certificate from the Intel environment. So there is a specific certificate in our environment for that. And then if you want to use a new feature in Asset Intelligence, a synchronization point, which lets you go up to the internet, download new catalogs, metadata of application signatures from Microsoft, on demand or interactively, there's a new site role called an Asset Intelligence Synchronization Point. That requires a specific certificate. And that is only available to software insurance customers. Non-SA customers, they have to do manual catalog downloads when we provide a new service pack or new catalog. And it's a manual process as opposed to automated. So the prereq checker will check to make sure you have admin rights to SQL Server, admin rights to your management point, make sure that you have 8.3 name support installed, which is enabled, which we require. So you do have to have 8.3 name support enabled. Active Directory schema extensions, not required, but we'll flag if they're not there. WSUS, it'll flag all those for you. It'll also, in Service Pack 1, one of the biggest issues our customers have had with deploying Configuration Manager is with SQL Server and SPN registration. We'll now validate that your SPNs are registered properly through the prereq setup program when you tell it what SQL Server you're using. SP1 requires FQDN for your management point. It doesn't require them for the rest of your boxes, but you do have to specify your FQDN for MPs now with Service Pack 1. And that's used for the client registration and approval process that I'll talk about in the next presentation. There is a new version of the Wake, so if you're utilizing Configuration Manager RTM and now you want to upgrade to the SP1 version, there's a new Wake version. Wake is a Windows Automated Installation Kit. Boot images for WinPE for OS deployment. That has to be upgraded. You may have to manually deinstall Wake 1.0. Just depends on your configuration and if a specific driver's loaded in memory at that point in time or not. And then again, WSUS 3.0 SP1. These are things that the prereq checker will check for you automatically. Hello. I'm going to skip this demo for 1 second. I'm going to do this demo, but I'm going to do it I'm going to do these out of order for you guys. You guys are special. Cliff told me to treat you as special. He said you weren't really, but treat you that way anyway. So, oops, sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that. And I got recorded again. There I am in trouble. Active Directory. Configuration Manager does require Active Directory. You cannot install Configuration Manager into an NT domain environment. So you have to be, your site server computers have to be Active Directory enabled. However, you don't have to extend the schema if you don't want to. So schema extensions are optional, but AD membership is mandatory for Configuration Manager. We highly recommend that you extend your schema, however. It's going to make it a lot easier for you as an admin, a lot easier to get clients installed and assigned to your sites if you do extend the schema. For Configuration Manager, the SMS 2003 schema is not good enough for a lot of the stuff we're doing in Configuration Manager. So you want to upgrade your schema. Again, I already mentioned if you're going to do NAP, Network Access Protection, you have to have the Configuration Manager schema in place. If you don't have the Configuration Manager schema extended, then in order to install clients, you have to have a server locator point in your environment. Otherwise, you will not be able to successfully install and assign clients to your site. And we'll talk more about that in the next presentation. We can use the SMS 2003 schema for some of the generic stuff, like site publishing, but not everything gets published there because the SMS 2003 schema doesn't have the site versions, site capabilities in what we call blobs that we publish to. So you would need the Configuration Manager version of it. You can upgrade your schema today. It will not impact SMS 2003 at all. We don't remove any SMS 2003 capabilities. We only add new capabilities to the Configuration Manager schema. So if you're an SMS 2003 customer today, you're looking at upgrading to Configuration Manager, you're safe in upgrading your schema today. It will not impact SMS 2003 at all. It'll still publish what it knows to publish, and it won't publish stuff to the V4 schema because it didn't know anything about it, obviously. One difference is that in SMS 2003 setup, there was a wizard page and checkbox where you could have setup extend the schema for you, if you remember that during setup. We don't provide that for you anymore because of the fact that most of the people that are running the setup of SMS are not schema admins. So they didn't have the capability of extending the schema anyway. So if I was logged on doing this and saying, yes, extend the schema, it may very well still fail on me because of the fact that I'm not a schema admin. So now it's a manual process. So outside of our setup program, you have to extend the schema. Just run the utility that I'm going to run here momentarily. Easiest way to extend the schema. It takes 5 seconds to do, and you're all done. There is no new update of the schema with SP1. So if you've already extended it for Configuration Manager, don't need to change your schema. If you go to the R2 release, there's no new schema in R2 either. And for reference, R2 is not an upgrade of Configuration Manager. You don't upgrade to the R2 release. You add R2 on top of SP1. SP1 is the version of the product. R2 is a set of add-on technologies to an SP1 site. I mentioned the extended process. You don't do that automatically during setup. So you just run the utility. There also is an LDIF file. Some of your AD shops may not want to use the utility. They want to use the LDIF file so you can see what's happening. We do provide an LDIF file. You can go ahead and use for that if you wish to. And then you have to grant site server rights to published Active Directory, which I'm going to show you right now. So, here we go. So here's my Active Directory domain control. I have two VPC images here. One's a DC, like you guys are going to have, and a separate one being a site server. Now, before I go ahead and extend my schema, I'm going to go ahead and run the prereq checker first. So I'll run prereq check. So I've already downloaded the evaluation version of Configuration Manager. The eval version is fully functional. Nothing's restricted in it at all, other than the fact it times out in 180 days with the SP1 version. The RTM version was 120 days. So it functions absolutely correctly, and nothing's restricted at all. So I'm going to run the prereq checker. You can do interactively, or you can do so from a command prompt if you wish to. You can check for a primary site, a secondary site, or an admin console computer. I'm going to do a site server. SMS server is my site server. SDK is the server that you want to put your, what they call a provider, which is the SDK is the provider that you're using, the security interface layer between the admin and the console and the database. So I'm going to put that on my site server as well, so SMS server. And then management point. So this computer is going to be the management point. If this was the RTM version, I could go ahead and accept this, and it would work perfectly. But in SP1, it doesn't. So SP1, we do require you to supply the full FQDN of your MP, and again, that's for client registration and approval. Now I do have an excuse why I'm typing lousy because my keyboard's at an angle here. So I got a built-in excuse. So good. And then again, you can check on secondary sites or admin console computers as well. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And it launches off the setup prereq checker. First thing it says, hey, you don't have schema extensions. So you don't have the schema extended for Configuration Manager. WSUS SDK on the site server. And then those 2 hot fixes which are required for Intel AMT Pro, vPro support. Notice the status is warning, which means I can still install without them. If I don't extend my schema, we will automatically turn off schema publishing in our setup program. So when you install your site, it won't be published in AD. So if I then do go and extend my schema, I have to go in there and turn on AD site publishing. Whereas in SMS 2003, we always assumed your schema is extended, even if you didn't tell us to. So I'm going to go ahead and one thing you can do here is you can double click on any one of these items. Then down at the bottom, it shows you in text what this item refers to. So if you're not sure what the WSUS SDK is, you can double click on it. It will tell you here what you have to install and what it means. So I'm going to leave this running. I'm going to go over to my domain controller. I'm going to go ahead and run the scheme extension utility. So this utility doesn't come on your AD. I just happen to stage it there just for ease of use. It took, 5 seconds it ran, and then it said it was all done. You don't know if it's done or not, so you got to go look at a log file, and there's a log file here in the rooted drive C, ext AD SCH for extend AD schema. If you just open up the log file in the best log file viewer in the world, Notepad, you'll see that in the top 2/3 of the log file it tells you, hey, I successfully published these attributes and then these classes, and then finally it says I successfully extended the schema. If I were upgrading from SMS 2003 schema to the V4 schema, you would see the vast majority of these things would say, like here when it says trying to define, oops, I hit a delete. Oh, well, I'm not going to say the log file anyway. It would say that the entry already exists, so that attribute of that class already existed if you're just upgrading the schema. If it's a brand new schema, then it'll just go and say, hey, I successfully defined this attribute. Then down at the bottom it says, hey, that's not enough. You need to give me rights. So I'm going to hold that for 1 second. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm just going to do the run check option again. So it's just going to run the schema, or run the prereq checker again, and now you notice the Active Directory schema option is not listed anymore. So it's not a warning because I have installed it. So it's very cool. It lets you can keep this running, fix whatever the change is. Oh, I don't have I may have a WSUS box, but I don't have the WSUS admin console on my site server. I can install that and just click run check again without exiting and restarting the prereq checker program. So very cool. And then we will give you, if you look at these bottom 2, we will give you a URL in this text of where to go get this update that you need to apply for whatever the support is. Again, status of warning, you're fine. Status of failure or error, you cannot install. So we block install because you'll see it's a failure. Now again, that wasn't enough, so let's go here. I have to give my site server rights to published AD. So to do that, I have to go to the system container. And what I do, which is not what a lot of people do, is I give rights to the system container for us to publish. And then we will create the system management container, which is really where we do our publishing. However, some AD teams won't want you to do that. They'll want you to pre-create the system management container, or they'll create it for you and give rights to it. I'm a cheap, easy guy, so I'm going to go with the system container route. So I'm going to go to Properties, and then if I want to publish successfully, my site server computer account needs to have, and it's a computer, so you need to turn on computer searching, needs to have full control rights to the container, and you go to Advanced, Edit, and the default is this object only, has to be this object and all child objects. So full control rights to the system or system management container and all child objects. You configure those, and that gives us the rights that we need to publish. So full control rights is not just enough to do this. Now, one thing people get concerned about or confused about is they think when they extend the scheme, it creates a system management container for them. And it doesn't. We create the container, if you don't on your own, when we install and start publishing. So once we've installed our site server and HMAN, Hierarchy Manager, tries to publish, it's going to go say, oh, no system management container. It's going to create it for us because it has rights to do so now. Now, personally, I see nothing wrong with doing the system container because it's a computer account I gave it rights to. but some people don't like that, so they will pre-create the system management container. And then the last thing you might do for integration of AD with Configuration Manager is set up your Active Directory sites. By default, there's one AD site, which is called default first site name. Never use that as a site boundary. Never use default first site name as a site boundary. The reason being, everybody's got default first site name as a Active Directory site. So now if you happen to set up a parent-child relationship between Gordon's site and my site, and we're both using default first site name as site boundaries, guess what? You now have overlapping boundaries, which is a really bad thing. So never use that one. Always go in there and create your own Active Directory sites, whatever's appropriate for you based on your boundaries, etc. I'll just create one called SCCM site because I'm not very creative. And then I want to give it subnets. I'll create a subnet for it. Oops. To specify what clients belong to the site. That's 192.168.1.0 with a class C subnet mask. And this subnet belongs to this AD site. And that's all I got to do. So at this point in time, I've got an Active Directory site that I want to use for my scope of client management. I want to manage clients in SCCM site. Well, I haven't told Configuration Manager that yet. I've just done this logically. I'll do that scoping once we get our site installed. So I've done the prereq checker, and I've gone ahead and prepared Active Directory. Okay, a couple things on R2, which again we'll talk about this afternoon. Again, it is not a new version of the product. It is required to be installed on top of the Service Pack 1 release, but it does not upgrade the server. Oh, there's looking for my pointer. It does not upgrade the site server. It does not upgrade clients. It adds on to an existing SP1 site, so there is no upgrade to R2. If you want to use SQL reporting services, you will have to have your own SRS box installed. So if you want to do reports now out of SRS as opposed to do reports out of our standard web reporting solution we have today, you have to create your own SRS box. We don't install SRS for you. So you're on your own creating that. Just like we don't install WSUS for you. And if you want to do patching, you have to install that on your own. Couple things in R2. Multicast support is limited. It's limited to Windows Server 2008 distribution points. So your distribution point has to be Windows Server 2008. And it's limited only for OSD and only when OSD is running under WinPE. So what it's useful for is multicasting your OS image file like Vista out to a number of clients that are currently sitting in WinPE. So you can deploy that image out once through a multicast if you're running Windows Server 2008 DPs out to these clients at one point in time, as opposed to individually shipping that X number of gigabytes vista.wim file or whatever you create across the wire to your clients. It does not do anything with software distribution. You cannot multicast WinPE out to your clients. It's for when your clients are already running in WinPE. So it sounds a lot better than it, I don't want to say than it really is, but it sounds great, but there are some limitations to it. So just be aware of that so you don't go getting your environment upgraded to SP1 just so you can do this and find out it's not going to do what you wanted it to do. And then upgrading to Windows Server 2008. Those are all good things, but just be aware of that.
Wally, just to confirm, the version of the site doesn't change when R2 goes on?
Correct. When you add the R2 stuff, your site is still 6221.1000. Yes. All right. So we've got our site prepared. Now let's do our deployment process. A couple different ways of installing: interactively through a CD or network share, and then you can script. So you can script. We give you scripts in the appendices on our online documentation. There are some samples on what you have to do for scripting your install if you want to do that. So you can do that through a script if you wish. Otherwise, interactive deployment, which is what I'm going to do. Secondary sites the same way in SMS 2003. You either install one over the network through the admin console on the primary site server, or you can interactively deploy one through the DVD or network share, or you can script and install of a secondary site. It's about a 150 megabyte package sent over the wire for Configuration Manager. In SMS 2003, I wanted to say it was 53 megabytes or 80 megabytes, somewhere in that range. So it's quite a bit larger of a package install now across the wire if you do the push of a secondary site over the wire. So just be prepared for that. Remember, IIS will be required in almost all cases, so assume IIS. We do support custom websites. So you can create custom websites now, which you could not do in SMS 2003. One restriction, however, is that all site system roles on the same box use the same website. So you can't have the MP using a custom website and the FSP using the default website. All configuration manager site roles on a single box use the same website.
Isn't the custom website set to SMS Web?
Yeah, the custom website name is SMS Web. That is the name for the custom website. Site system configuration, we'll see this installed a little bit later on. You can configure a push or pull operation. That's very cool. So when you guys, I guess you call them DMZs here, when you have a DMZ environment with the site system in there, let's say an MP to support your internet-based clients, and you don't want to poke holes in your firewall both directions. Instead, you can make this a pull site system, which means when clients send data to the MP, instead of the MP pushing that data to the site server, the data is held at that MP, and the site server will reach through the firewall, grab that data, and pull it back through. So you can do that on a per site system basis if you want to. Then you also have to configure your client approval method if you're in mixed mode. And I'll talk about mixed versus native mode coming up. In mixed mode, clients need to be approved before they can utilize the network access account. And you guys are probably familiar with the network access account. If you have workgroup-based clients or clients with no user logged on and the computer account's in a different forest, they can't use their computer account to access the distribution points, you need the network access account. In order to use the network access account, your client has to be approved if you're in mixed mode. The default configuration is for automatic approval for all domain joined clients. In other words, clients in the same forest as the site server. If you have clients in different forests, then it'll be a manual approval process, or there's an option you can say approve everybody, which I'll show you that when we get installed here. So the two different site modes, this would be kind of like the security modes in SMS 2003 where we had standard security and advanced security. Mixed mode is our bare bones security mode now. It's called mixed mode, and it's almost exactly like advanced security in SMS 2003. So using computer accounts across the wire, running under local system context, and et cetera. The difference is that we have data signing enabled automatically, whereas in SMS 2003, data signing was an optional feature. You had to go turn it on your site as of SP1 of SMS 2003. Now it's automatically signing all data from clients. Data encryption is still an option in Configuration Manager, but that's added automatically. If you upgrade from SMS 2003, you're going to upgrade from Advanced Security, which is early option, to Mixed Mode. And then you can migrate from Mixed Mode to Native Mode once your site's ready to go to Native Mode. Mixed Mode can be selected during install. That's what I'm going to go ahead and install actually here so I don't throw out the PKI stuff. Mixed Mode is very, very good for interoperability between SMS 2003, Service Pack 2, and Service Pack 3. So if you need to have a mixed hierarchy of Mixed Mode and of SMS 2003 and Configuration Manager, Mixed Mode is where you want your sites that are interfacing with SMS 2003 to be. The other option you have for security or site mode is Native Mode. Native Mode is a more secure environment because instead of in Mixed Mode, each computer account, when a computer gets installed as a client, it creates a self-signed certificate and sends that in as its identity to the Configuration Manager site. That's the process we call registration. So the client creates its own self-signed cert, sends that into the MP. The MP creates a registration request and forwards that off to the site server, and we add that client's identity, its certificate, to the database. And now whenever the client sends any data to the MP goes to the database and says, hey, is this who he says he is? This guy says here's his cert. Is that the proper cert? So am I being spoofed here? And we do that off of self-signed certs in Mixed Mode. In Native Mode, instead of self-signed search from clients, you now have full mutual machine authentication with PKI. So it does require a public key infrastructure. Doesn't have to be Microsoft. So it can be any third-party PKI that you want. You just have to have specific certificates deployed to specific systems in order to make this work. And we document in our product documentation what those certificates are. A document signing certificate for your site server, a web server certificate for your MP and bits-enabled DPs and all those kind of things, and then maybe an NLB certificate and client certificates. We document what those are. You have to get that fully deployed out in your infrastructure before you install your site into Native Mode, or before you migrate your site from Mixed Mode to Native Mode, which you can do. So my personal recommendation is I would never install a site in Native Mode. I'd always install my site in Mixed Mode, get my site working, get all my functionality working, Then once I verify that my clients are working fine, software distribution is working fine, my clients are pulling the MP, everything's working fine, then when I get my PKI ready to roll and my search deployed, then I would migrate my site from mixed mode to native mode. Otherwise, you always have that security layer there in the middle, so when something doesn't work, well, is it a PKI problem? Is it a cert problem? Is it an SMS problem? Or is it a Wally problem? Which could really be a Wally problem. So I take that out of the loop, install mixed mode, get my functionality done, verifying everything, then I migrate over to native mode. So that's my personal recommendation. The product group probably hates me for saying that, but that's what I think. Secondary sites will always be the same mode as the parent primary site is. So you can't have a native mode primary site and a mixed mode secondary site, or vice versa. In fact, mixed mode cannot be a parent of a native mode. Mixed mode can report to a parent site that's native mode, however. Yes?
It might be worth stating, Wally, that you can revert back.
Yes,
If
yes.
you fail,
So, one very cool thing is that you screwed up your certificates. You installed your site in native mode, and you screwed up your certs. Now, none of your clients install properly. Well, if you don't want to spend the time in the cert area to try and figure out what's going on because you're a rookie at it, like I would be, you can convert your site back to mixed mode, get all your clients installed, make everything work fine. Then when you got somebody that knows what they're doing with certificates and PKI in place, get all that done and convert back over. So it's not a one-time shot like SMS 2003, standard security to advanced security. You were stuck. You couldn't migrate back, which I don't know why you would want to, but you couldn't do so. Here, you can go back and forth as many times as you want to.
Just one thing about that rolling backwards and forwards is that you'd have to reinstall the client.
No, you don't have to reinstall the client. Even though Rob says you have to reinstall your clients, Rob doesn't know what he's talking about. No. If you guys haven't figured out, I like to joke around a little bit. Besides my looks, I like to joke around. You will have to reinstall if you're not extending your schema for Configuration Manager. If you have your schema extended for Configuration Manager, clients will try and talk to the MP. They'll get this error message that indicates something's wrong. They'll go then check AD. What's my site capabilities? It'll say native mode, and clients will automatically switch over and migrate over. But yeah, if your site's not publishing AD, then you will have to reinstall all your clients. Yes. Now, it might take up to a day, 24 hours before those clients figure this out and get their site reinstalled, everything else. But yeah, I actually have a lab. I think they're going to have it down in Barcelona next week on migrating a site from mixed mode to native mode. And I do that. I don't reinstall the clients. I just have you get the site up and running, get the site converted over. Then when it's all set, ready to roll, you just basically I just have you stop and start CCM exec on the client. And within minutes, it's a native mode client. Coolness. But don't be shy of telling me something else in the future. No. If you guys didn't realize, I'm joking. When I make fun of anybody, I'm joking, except for me.
That's going to stop you from crying.
No, you can cry all you want. I got the mic, so I'll come close if you want to hear you on mic. All righty. Let's go kick off and install. Install is fairly simple. I just want to point out a couple things here for you, then we'll kick this off. I'm actually not going to let this site complete installing because it's going to take the entire rest of the presentation to complete my site install, and I got other images we're going to use for our installed site, otherwise you wouldn't get to any other demos. So your normal welcome screen, you can install a site server, or you can install an admin console. We're going to install a site server. You guys read really fast, so glad you all accepted. Two different modes here for installation, custom settings or simple settings. I will shoot you if you ever choose simple settings. Anybody here from a magazine or a press or anything like that? Okay, no, good. That is there for just press people. It's there to get a site installed as easily as possible so you don't have to turn anything on, you don't have to know anything, and everything's up and running for you. But it turns on more stuff than you probably want, and it causes more network traffic than you probably want initially. So always choose custom settings so that you're in control of what happens. We actually did toy with calling this press reviewer mode, the simple settings. So primary site, secondary site, we still have them. Still have primary site, secondary sites. They do the exact same things they did in SMS 2003. So if you knew what they were before, you know what they are now. Nothing changes at all there, other than some of the new capabilities and so on that they have, new site system roles. You can install a secondary site from here. However, your first site has to be a primary site because the secondary site does nothing without a primary. So it's got to have a parent to talk to and get information from. So you really can't successfully install a secondary site first. It always has to be a primary site. Customer Experience Improvement Program, we recommend you say yes, please do capture my information. That way we see not individual things you're doing in the console, but areas of the product you're looking at. So from this, we have noticed that only a very small percentage of our customers have ever even touched device management in our node. So that tells us that it's not important, so maybe we can rely on other features. We can take that time we spend on device management and put it towards other features, or push people to mobile device manager, whatever. So that's the type of stuff we collect with the Customer Experience Improvement Program. What are you doing in the console so we know where your features you're using, so where do we spend more time in the future? Now I'm on a virtual environment, so it doesn't matter. This is the eval version, so the PID's built in. Don't try and copy down this PID and use it for your PID. It's not going to work. Sorry. Besides, I'm not being, he probably is taping what my slides are showing as well in the demos. Default path is program file, wherever program files is, Microsoft Configuration Manager. You can change that if you want to. Remember in the old days it used to be C:SMS. Now you get to control that, which you could before as well. It just was hidden more before. This stuff doesn't change from SMS 2003. So unfortunately, site codes are still 3 characters. So if I choose something like MCM, and your site name is just descriptive text like config manager 2007, primary site, whatever you want here. You can't change these post-install. So figure it out first. Make sure you have some good idea why you said MCM. Don't just randomly pick 3 characters, because if you then merge with some other company and they randomly pick those same 3 characters, there's no parent-child relationship. And you can't change without deinstalling and reinstalling. So someday in the future we may get beyond a 3-character site code. But for current technology, it is 3 characters. It does include numbers as well. So some people use airport city codes like LHR or SEA for Seattle. If you have multiple sites there, then maybe a building code, like I'm in building 44, so it might be B44. Whatever you want, whatever makes sense. And then the name is your descriptive text on it. Then here's where you designate site mode. You can see the default is native mode, but that requires a certificate. So I'd have to have my site server signing certificate available so I could browse to it, or thumbprint it in here and just paste it in. I don't have that, so I have to go with native or mixed mode. Again, you can change later on, which is what my recommendation would be. What client agents do you want enabled by default? You can turn these off if you want to, but it's just enabled by default. It doesn't do any other configuration of them, and you can change them later after the fact. Everything's turned on by default except for NAP, because NAP requires Windows Server 2008 for a server with a network policy server enabled on it and the scheme extensions enabled. And then you can have a NAP client, which could then prevent clients from accessing the network unless they're fully compliant with whatever your policies are. What computer do you want to be your SQL Server computer? It detected that SQL is on my box, so it lets me do that, assumes I want to use that. We support named instances, so you can go ahead and specify your named instance if you have a named instance you want to utilize. We do support clustering as well with Configuration Manager, so you can cluster your SQL Server database, provided there's nothing else on that SQL Server. You can't cluster anything besides SQL Server. So it can't be a shared or co-located SQL box with anything else in Configuration Manager. Database name, whatever you want to call it, the default is SMS underscore your site code. What computer do you want to be the SMS provider? In SMS 2003, you had 2 choices, your site server, your SQL server. Now you have 3 choices, your site server, SQL server, or any other server you want it to be. The reason for that is a lot of times you don't want the provider on your site server because it's doing all the security validation, and that could bog down your server performance. So in SMS 2003, it was SQL Server. However, we can cluster SQL Server now, but we can't cluster the provider. So if you don't want it on your site server for perf reasons, you can't put it on your SQL Server because it's clustered. That means some other box. So you can specify some other box here if you need to. In your management point, notice it found the FQDN already. I have no idea why we let you not have a management point when you install your site, because you have to have one. You can't have any kind of client in Configuration Manager without a management point. There's no such thing as a legacy client anymore, so everything requires an MP. So I don't know why. I'm sure there's some good, valid reason why we let you turn this off, but I don't know what it is. You can specify your port 80 by default, or 443 if you're in native mode, and then you can use a custom port if you want to. I'll go with the defaults. Okay, here's the client prerequisites. So I have to have this set of 80-some files for installation of clients later on, which I'll do in part 2. It's assuming that my site server can get up to the internet and download these interactively. I don't. I'm on a VPC environment without shared networking, so I can't get to the internet. So I'm going to choose the second option. But if my site server does have internet connectivity, just bingo, click next, we'll go find them, and we'll go ahead and download them automatically and stage them for the MP. I don't have, so what I will do is this option, and then I'll browse to where my files are. And I've already downloaded these files into SCCM downloaded client files. If you want to see what that looks like, there they are. It's a whole bunch of bits 2.0, bits 2.5, RDC components, and then down at the very bottom, I think we have, or in the middle somewhere, we have Windows Update Agent 3.0. Come on. There we go, Windows Update Agent. So it's just a bunch of bits. The stuff we absolutely have to start a client, then WMI redistributable. Now, if I don't have internet access and I want to download these, I would just go to my setup directory. Oops. Setup. Come on. Oh, I went to the wrong. Oh, I see. I see what the issue is. There we go. That's better. I would go here and I would do a setup / download and then some path. So I just run from a command prompt from the setup i386 directory or whatever the appropriate platform is. Setup space / download C:path. And that will go up on this computer that I'm running this on, download those files, stage them into that folder, and then I just tell my installer, go to that path. Then we immediately go and validate that path to make sure that your manifest file, make sure the manifest is correct. It's a different set of files between RTM and SP1. They're not interchangeable. So you got to have the correct set of files with the correct manifest for RTM versus SP1.
Just a quick question about the WSUS stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Can I, if I've got an existing WSUS server, can I upgrade that server in terms of component role?
Yeah, so you can use an existing WSUS box as your, what we would call a software update point. Yeah. Our recommendation is not. Now, I'll get it in 1 second. I click next here. It's going to run the prereq checker for me automatically. So you don't have to do it prior like I did. However, the advantage of running it prior is that if it tells me things, oh, I got to go change this, I can do that outside of running setup. So it's a lot, I think it's better if you run it pre. I'm going to kick off begin install. And I'll come back to your question there, Gordon. So I'll let this guy run here for a second. Our recommendation is to set up a brand new WSUS box just for Configuration Manager. Reason being is if you already have WSUS, that means you already have a WSUS admin. And we don't want Rob being your WSUS admin going in there and doing any administration of WSUS once it's a SUP, because he may go in there and change something that we're going to overwrite with our settings later on. So you can have competing settings going on between what Rob puts as your WSUS settings and what we put as your WSUS settings as a software update point. So if you do use an existing WSUS box, our recommendation is you never touch the console again. You let us manage everything from inside our console instead of you going in there on your own in the WSUS admin console.
Does CCM automatically change the group policy? Because obviously most people would have group policies.
Okay, so that's a different area of contention. Okay. So if you already have a WSUS environment and you already have a domain group policy to set the specified Internet Microsoft Update Service location, yeah, which you probably have, if that's a domain policy, then you're going to blow up the SCCM ability to scan for patches and report compliance. You have to remove that policy so that we can set that policy. So even if it's the exact same URL, if our policy application or evaluation process fails because we can't set it because you have a domain policy that we can't override, then our policy fails and our clients don't know to scan.
So blowing away that WSUS server would also include blowing away the policy?
You would want to get rid of that group policy if it's something that we can't override. Get rid of that so that we can go ahead and set that URL appropriately for our software update point. Yes?
Does WSUS have to be connected to the internet?
Does WSUS have to be connected to the internet? If you want to do a, the answer is no. However, the caveat being you can have a WSUS box that does not have an internet connectivity and does not talk to any upstream server. So if I'm in an environment where I have no internet access, that WSUS box, I can manually import the catalog metadata in that WSUS box and we can work with it. However, what you can't do, and the reason I hesitated on your answer is, you can't say my WSUS box, which is my SUP for Configuration Manager, is a downstream server of some other box that's on the internet. We don't support that. So either your WSUS box goes to Microsoft Update, or you manually import the catalog through your WSUS util. Now, as a child site, so your central site, WSUS, would go to the internet. As a child primary site or child secondary site, if you have a SUP, that will be set to upstream server, which would be your parent site's WSUS box. So there we do support it. But realistically, you have to have, your central site has to go to the internet. Either you manually or us automatically. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll show you actually in the next presentation. I'll be setting up a actually I already have WSUS set up, but I'll show you some configuration of it, and I'll show you those 3 options there. Okay, so this one goes through it. It shows you what tasks have been started, which ones are completed, which ones are in progress. Notice the next button here is not available. It does not become available until all these things have either completed or have failed. And we may have failures. But until all one of these has a status other than not started or in progress, that guy doesn't become illuminated. So it doesn't tell you, again, how long you have left to creating and initializing your site database. You just know that it is doing something, hopefully. If you're unsure, you can always look at the setup log file in the root drive C and just see that it is adding new lines to that log file. But other than that, once you get past these first few, I think it's registering controls. Once you get past that one, then you'll see multiple things will be in progress at the same time. So you see multiple of these. And at one point, you'll see the bottom half of this all in progress at the same time because they're all real quick little things. The longest things are creating and initializing the database, especially on an upgrade. That'll take a long time to upgrade your database. Transferring files is taken from the installation source into our cache here. And then create boot image packages. That's where we install Wake 1.1, and then we extract out of it the WinPE images for x86 and x64 WinPE for OS deployment. A lot of the other stuff below that are really, really quick things. The last thing we do is create program group, because no sense giving you a program group until you got the code installed. Otherwise, you're out there trying to do stuff, which you shouldn't be doing. So, normally, I would let this keep running on my laptop, because I'd have a different system for demoing, but our different system bombed out on us. So I'm actually going to kill this because I need images that are already installed. Because on my laptop, I know this takes about 45 minutes to install, aside on my laptop, because it's not the world's greatest laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and kill this, and kill my images, in fact. And I'm going to boot up different images that I already have with a site installed, so we can do demos with our site installed. So hopefully that doesn't offend anybody by me doing this. And I'm going to go ahead and get these started.
Quick question on WSUS.
Yeah.
You lose the ability to do auto approval, don't you? Since you start these
Yes. Configuration Manager, oops, can't be identified. I had to copy these over in my path here, so I'll get there in 1 second. Let me get this guy booted up. Looks like the right one to me. Oops, maybe not. Maybe not. See, it wasn't the right path. There we go, which means my other ones will have problems, but I don't need those for right now. Site server, I only need this one for right now. Okay, he's booting up. So yes, there is no such thing as auto approval of updates in Configuration Manager. So in Configuration Manager, you have to go in and do your approvals as the admin by selecting your updates and then adding them to a deployment. That's your approval process. That is something that we're looking at for a future release that might include automatic approval process. But today it's not.
So if we go back to my original question, which is I've got this isolated box that I do the approvals on, and then import them, that's not going to work.
Well, it'll work, but it's not going to do anything for Configuration Manager. Configuration Manager doesn't care about those automatic approvals. So you can approve, you can have WSUS configured to automatically approve all your updates, and that does not affect us at all. We don't accept that. So that's not a parameter we look at. You have to go in. You have to go into your admin console, select the updates you want to deploy, and then if you follow the recommended path, you add them to an update list. You take that update list and drop it on top of a deployment with drag and drop, or just assign it to the deployment template, and then it kicks off our wizard, which is the distribute software update wizard, takes those updates that were selected, and then it basically does the approval process from that. So it's a longer process of deploying updates. However, you have a lot more control over when they get deployed and who they get deployed to than you have with WSUS. Yeah, but so if you're looking for ease of use, then that's not this. That's WSUS. But if you want more control, that's us. Okay, now deploying site systems. So we'll assume that our site has fully installed. So it's going through, it's probably done with the database stuff, it's transferring files, or would have been, but I killed them. And it's going to install. I've got, again, a site that's already installed, so we'll be using those images. So for site system roles, we've got to now configure our site to support our clients. Most of the site system roles that you know from SMS 2003 are the same in Configuration Manager. So the site server, primary, secondary, still the same. Site database server, still the same, other than the fact you can cluster it, and it can be a newer version of SQL Server. Management point, server locator point, reporting point, distribution point, those are all the same. Nothing really changes on those. We removed 2 site roles from SMS 2003. There's no longer a client access point, which makes everybody happy. So they don't have one of those anymore, so none of that static file replication crap going on down to client access points, because we don't need them because there's no legacy clients anymore. And sender component server. What that allowed you to do was to have a sender that was used to communicate with a parent site or a child site that was off your site server. Now through the admin console, your senders are on your site server. Although I've been told I'm not an SDK guy. I can't even spell API, let alone use one. But I've been told in the SDK you can create a sender server with the SDK. But that's going to be for somebody else to qualify that, because again, I know nothing about the SDK. Let me see that, guys. So, okay, still booting up.
Wally,
yes.
Booting up. So, looking at the system roles there.
That's not all of them.
Yeah, but where would you recommend to split off with those roles? So, what would you recommend?
Oh, hang on. Hang on, you're jumping ahead.
You need to learn 2 important words.
Yeah.
It depends.
Well, let's say split.
Or the other 2 important words, be patient. Yeah, I'll get to that, Gordon.
Oh, okay.
I will get to that. So new site system roles, because this will kind of play into your answer here. For operating system deployment, state migration point. A state migration point is a secure file server that you use to migrate user state from old computer to the new computer. So I'm in an OSD scenario. I'm going to go from this old laptop computer over to this brand new laptop computer, but I want to get all my documents, all my user information from here over there. State migration point is how we do that. So you set up an SMP, you run USMT, USMT would back up state from here, stuff it up on the SMP. I do a state restore over here, which goes up to the SMP, finds that state that was securely identified for me, and locked down between the old computer and the new computer, and lets me restore that state. You can have as many of those as you want to in your site. Pixie service point. So again, I'm an OSD. I want to take a bare metal box, and this bare metal box, I want to go ahead and make the ability of deploying OSD images to it, OS images. So I take a WDS box. This is Windows Deployment Services. I take Windows Deployment Services box, and I make it a Pixie service point. What this does now, it adds a new provider to WDS and puts our provider tops on the list. We're king. So that when a bare metal box boots up, it does a Pixie request. That Pixie request goes to WDS. It sees our provider first. Hey, SMS, do you know who this guy is? If so, what task sequence do I give this bare metal box? And if we don't know who it is, then we'll go ahead and say, I can't help you out. And then Pixie can go find, WDS could then go find a different provider to give to that client, to find a different boot image. And you can have as many of those as you want to in a site, as you spread out over different links, because you want to control where your traffic is being generated from. But that's not all. Software update point, that's WSUS box. You take an existing WSUS box, which can be obviously installing a brand new one, but it's an existing WSUS box at that point in time, and then you install our code on top of it, which makes it a software update point. What we use the software update point for is catalog repository. So instead of you on a monthly basis going up to Microsoft Update and downloading this WSUS scan cab file that you do today with SMS 2003 and ITMU, instead of doing that, we get the catalog from WSUS. And because we're using WSUS as our catalog, we essentially get all the content that WSUS has. Not patch content, but as far as metadata. So all the different classes, classifications of products and so on you get in WSUS, you for the most part get in Configuration Manager. With one exception, and that is definition updates. We don't support definition updates. So don't ask me anything about it. I'm not going to answer any questions on FCS updates. No, we actually did just release a white paper on how you can support forefront definition updates through Configuration Manager. And it's not really Configuration Manager doing it, it's still the FCS service doing it, but we don't officially support those. Network access protection, system health validator we talked about before. Client deployment and distress. That's a fallback status point. And the reason it's labeled that way is for the distress portion, the original purpose of a fallback status point was I have clients on the internet that I want to make sure that they can communicate with me somehow. So if for whatever reason the firewall blocks them or whatever, they can't get to the management point they're supposed to communicate with, they would have this other box. It's unsecure HTTP traffic that they could dump a state message saying, I can't talk to my MP. Nobody's talking to me right now. So that's the distress point, kind of an SOS help message. The client deployment is, hey, I want to go ahead and deploy clients. And with those clients, I want to go ahead and know when the clients got deployed successfully. So who succeeded, who failed. And you can do that with an FSP. And I'll show you that in part 2. Software distribution, we add a branch distribution point. The theory behind the branch DP is that now you can make content available to pockets of users, like remote offices with half dozen users on them, through a workstation as opposed to putting a full-fledged secondary site down there or even a full-fledged distribution point down there. So a branch DP can be a workstation class system with workstation OS that provides content to other resources. The theory behind the branch DP was that you could then use it in lieu of secondary sites in a lot of cases. I'm not going to say always, but you could in some cases use that instead of a secondary site. They support OSD as well as software updates in addition to software distribution. And then we mentioned the SMS provider can be on a third computer. We already talked about that. Okay, some deployment tips. You want to have an FSP in your hierarchy. It's not a requirement. However, you get some really good deployment reports that are available only through fallback status points. So I would never install a site or a hierarchy without having an FSP. I would never do it. You always want to have an FSP in your environment.
And that's in both mixed and native mode?
Both mixed and native mode, yes.
When you say deployment reports, what's the goal? OS deployment, application deployment?
This is for client deployment, so SMS client. So nothing to do with software distribution or software updates. You'll actually see them in the next presentation. I'll show you this. Don't place distribution points on remote links on remote systems over unreliable or low-speed links. Remember how we work with distribution point? It's a site server pushes the entire content right now over that link. If it's unreliable, if it's slow link, you may have just consumed 100% of that WAN bandwidth, replicating your 8 gig Vista WIM file down there, which means nothing else is happening over that wire while we're doing that, and it may take a long time. Instead, consider either a secondary site, because you get schedulers and senders and compression, or a branch DP. Because the branch DP, the site server doesn't push the content to a branch DP. The branch DP actually pulls the content utilizing bits from a standard DP in your site. So you got bits throttling, bits technology to help control that download of that data. You can also pre-stage content on branch DPs that you can't do on standard DPs. So I could take that 8 gig Vista file and manually copy it over to my branch DP and tell Configuration Manager, oh, by the way, it's already on the branch DP, so don't copy it. Actually, it would be and tell Configuration Manager client not to do that. Okay, so separate your site systems as much as you can. So I know people want to do server consolidation. The recommendation is to do server consolidation, is to have more site systems than fewer site systems. Now, the primary reason for that, 2 primary reasons are troubleshooting. It's easier to identify a problem if there's not multiple roles on that same box. Is my problem a FSP problem? Is it a MP problem? Is it whatever? Now, when you're first learning, that's good. Once you've learned the products, you know how things interoperate, then it's less of a deal. But the bigger thing is scalability. The more things you put on a single box, the fewer clients you can have in that box, or the beefier the hardware you have to have. So if you want, whenever you see scalability numbers, Like we just released a white paper a couple months ago on scalability and performance. They'll tell you in there what roles they offloaded to other boxes. So for better scalability and performance, we'd recommend multiple different boxes. Now, fallback status point is one we highly recommend you put on its own box. The reason being that, remember I mentioned this is for distress. My client can't talk to anybody else. It takes HTTP traffic from anybody. So there's no security on an FSP. All these other guys have some level of security, like a management point. Management point has that self-signed certificate or the mutual authentication through PKI. So I can validate who's sending me stuff. You don't do that with an FSP because it may be a client that hasn't talked to the MP at all yet, and it's just trying to say, hey, I didn't get installed properly. So it's got to be unsecure traffic. So because of that, we recommend it's on its own box, just for the lack of security. Everything else can be co-located, so you can co-locate everything that you want to, other than the fact, again, with the clustered SQL Server, you can't put anything else on it. NLB support is still the same. Management point, server locator point, and we do support WSUS boxes, software update points, NLB clustered. Because WSUS supports 25,000 boxes, 25,000 clients per box, just like an MP does. So if you want to go up to 100,000 per site, which we support, you have to have an NLB cluster of 4 software update points. So there may be some restrictions there and there, but for the most part, scalability and performance separate. If you've got really great hardware, which some of our TAP customers do, they put everything on a single box and it works great.
Are these all good virtual candidates or not?
Everything in our environment is fine to be virtualized. You just have to understand in virtual technology, you're not going to get the same performance you get in a physical environment. Because you always have that overhead. But
I was thinking kind of like a huge Hyper-V box with all these roles in the same box. Would that work, or would you recommend not doing it like that?
We have a lot of people that are virtualizing down to single boxes in IIS environments, so they put all the IIS roles on a single box. Yeah. Okay. So very, very commonly done. You just want to have as much horsepower available as possible. And look at that scalability white paper. We give, I think in a scalability white paper, we had 10,000, 25,000, 50,000, and I think 100,000 client, or maybe it's 200,000 client scale. What hardware we used, and they actually listed the hardware, as well as how they set up the drive configuration and memory and all that kind of stuff. So very, very good.
Best document I've seen.
Pardon?
Probably the best document I've seen.
Cool. I wrote it. No, I didn't. I didn't. I reviewed it though, so there. I offered my input. I'm not sure John took it all, but hey, I offered it anyway. So these are your site system roles. These ones in white are what you know from SMS 2003. Those are all still there. There we go. These in yellow or whatever, these are the new roles for Configuration Manager. So these two for OSD, WSUS, fallback status point, and then your system health validator if you want it. And then, of course, you have a branch DP, and you can cluster SQL Server. And then for Service Pack 1, Asset Intelligence Sync Point and Out-of-Band Service Point if you want those features. And for R2, Reporting Services Point. So doing reporting out of SRS as opposed to reporting out of our web-based reporting point sitting there. And again, yes, all those can be on the same box with the exception of nothing else with the clustered SQL Server. And Branch DP has a couple limitations for internet-based clients. Internet-based clients can't get content from a branch DP, nor can an internet-based client be a branch DP. It's got to be a configuration manager client that's on something other than Windows 2000. We don't support branch DPs on Windows 2000. But other than that, it can be co-located with other stuff. And we have had some people think, okay, I'm going to make all my DPs now branch DPs. Doesn't work. You have to have at least one of these guys, a standard DP, because branch DPs download content from a standard DP. So the content has to be on a standard DP, and then you can go ahead and download it to your branch DP.
It might be useful talking about the debate of putting SQL Server on a separate box on the Config Manager.
Okay, SQL Server remotely or co-located with Site Server. Our testing has proven if you want the absolutely best performance in your environment, you separate SQL Server from the Site Server, which is absolutely opposite of our SMS 2.0 and 2003 recommendation. So yes, we do actually, if you want the absolute best performance, you separate these two boxes. and you have a dedicated, really high speed, like our testing and that thing that was in that white paper said 100 gigabyte link between the two, between the SQL Server and your site server. So now, with that said, the vast majority of people are never going to see a difference in their performance between co-locating SQL Server and having one remote. Because most people aren't going to put a 100 gigabyte link between their two different boxes, and you don't have enough clients to really worry about that. But so there's not a single, like Cliff said, it's one of the it depends answers. There's not a single answer to what everybody would want as far as co-locating versus remote boxes. But that is the recommendation if you want the absolute best performance. Whereas back in the old days, SQL Server wasn't as good, networks weren't nearly as good, so we had better performance co-located in two boxes or two services.
If you separate them, you put a provider on the SQL Server or the site. That's performance.
Can you what?
If you have them on separate boxes, you put the provider on the SQL Server. Or the
Oh, if you have them on separate boxes, most people put it on SQL Server, as long as it's not clustered. Because it's one where you're doing all the security stuff in the database anyway. And I didn't point out here, multicast and AVM streaming. Multicast, obviously, if it's Windows Server 2008, and AVM is application virtualization management. So the ability of using this as a soft grid box to stream virtual applications as well, which I talked about in the last presentation, which I need to get moving on. So adding site systems. So here's my site. The site's there. I've done nothing as far as any administration of this site. I just installed it. I just put everything on a single box as opposed to the separate DC and the site server. So one thing you'll notice is once you do connect up to your site database, is that it will tell you what mode your site is running in, whether you're running in mixed mode or native mode. So up here at the top, oh, there it is. There, hidden there for me, mixed mode. And it'll tell you whether you're mixed mode or native mode. So if I want to go ahead and add new site system roles, you go down to site systems, a little bit different than you had in SMS 2003, but go down to site systems. If I'm going to use everything on a single box, which I am, I just launch off the new roles wizard. And that will then allow me to go ahead and specify my FQDN, which again I already have done because I have this SP1 has the MP on the same box. Here's where you can specify, oops, oh, I can't on the site server. It is a different box. There's a checkbox down here for enable as a push versus pull. So enable pull mode for that DMZ environment. If I was going to support this box on internet for clients based on the internet, I would go ahead and specify the FQDN for the internet-based clients as well. I'm not doing that, so I won't do that. You can specify a different account other than the site server computer account to interface with your remote site system. So that was kind of like SMS 2003 in standard security mode. You could have a different account that was used to set up your site systems. You can do that as well now in either security mode. I just want to go in here and I'm going to select, I don't need a server locator point. If all of your clients are AD based and your schema's been extended for Configuration Manager and all your clients are in the same forest as your site server, you wouldn't need a server locator point. You need a server locator point if the schema is not extended for Configuration Manager, or you have clients that aren't in the same forest as the site server. That's when you need that to validate the site version or site code. So I'm just going to go ahead and install a reporting point because I want to show you fallback status reporting. And I'm going to go ahead and just install him as the only one for right now. And I'll go with the defaults. And this is kind of misleading. We're working now, which we are, and we say, hey, we're all done. What we're done with is completing this wizard. It's not like we magically now have installed the reporting point, and when the close button becomes available, the reporting point's there. We still have to go out there and do our work. All this wizard did was create the site control file entries to say, hey, go out there and install a reporting point. So it may be done by now because it didn't take very long. Nope, it's still installing. So it doesn't take very long to install a reporting point. You see RP setup here. So momentarily it's going to stop and have SMS RPH sitting right there. So right above my highlight, SMS RPH, so my reporting point's done. But it just says, hey, I created the site control file necessary to do the work. Now, a couple other things you might want to do is on your Configuration Manager distribution point, if I want to make this a bits enabled DP, let's go and select the checkbox. So select the checkbox to allow HTTP transfers from here. If I'm going to support mobile devices, then I have to select this bottom checkbox to say allow anonymous connections, which mobile devices do. Here you see the checkbox or the radio button for branch DP. I can't be a branch DP in a standard DP, and so I'm not able to, it's not a client. You can't be a branch DP if you're not a client. You have to be a configuration manager client that's not running Windows 2000 and not native mode before you can be a branch DP. So I'll go ahead and select that. And we'll let that guy do its work. Go back here, got a couple more slides. We need to finish this up and take a break so we can come back and do the next presentation. So understanding boundaries. Boundaries, you guys all know site boundaries in SMS 2003. So you know local roaming boundaries and remote roaming boundaries. Cool thing is those are all gone. You don't have to worry about local roaming boundaries or remote roaming boundaries, site boundaries versus roaming boundaries. Nobody knew what they were for. Confused everybody all the time. So we got rid of them. So we have one thing now called boundaries. And there's no concept of local roaming versus remote roaming, site boundary versus roaming boundaries. So you have one node under site settings called boundaries. It's not a site property anymore. Boundaries are either fast boundaries or slow boundaries. Fast boundaries would be what you know as an SMS 2003 local roaming boundary, and a slow boundary would be what you know as a SMS 2003 remote roaming boundary. So you kind of have that same concept, but you don't have to worry about whether it's a site boundary or a roaming boundary. There's only one type of boundary. That's a boundary. It's used for client assignment, and it's used for content location. So it's a bit easier. Another cool thing in Configuration Manager is that boundaries flow up the hierarchy. So I'll get you one second. So as a central site in your admin console, because it's a node in the admin console now, you'll get all of the boundaries from all of your child sites, which is very cool in that if I'm halfway intelligent, then I might be able to detect conflicts with all my boundaries from all my child sites replicating up. I might be able to say, oh, they got the same subnet in two different sites. That's bad. Oh, I know this IP subnet is a member of this AD site. That's bad. Because now they're in two different sites, overlapping boundaries, which are still bad. We did nothing in Configuration Manager to accommodate overlapping boundaries, other than the fact we have the boundaries node where you can see what your boundaries are. So, question?
It's just a question around branch DPs.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's, I take it that it's local to the site, but it's over a slow link. So which of the boundary types would you define as branch DP?
Your branch DPs, you would protect your branch DP for the boundary you want to service clients for. So if that's an IP subnet over a remote link, your content location for those clients is going to be fast because you're going to be in the same subnet as the branch DP. So you would designate that. It depends if the client's going to be all incoming from branch DP is protected, make it fast for those clients. If your clients are not going to be protected for a branch DP and they might go to another DP, then it would be considered a slow boundary. Really, the fast versus slow is not your link speed. It's do I always want to allow content or do I want to restrict content based on the boundary location? You can create SMS 2003 secondary site boundaries from our admin console, but you cannot create boundaries for an SMS 2003 primary child site from the Configuration Manager console. In fact, you can't administer an SMS 2003 primary child site from the Config Manager admin console at all. You can administer a secondary site from the Config Manager console, but not a primary child site, primary SMS 2003 site. You have to have co-located admin consoles, but you can put the SMS 2003 console, have it installed, and then add the Configuration Manager console on top of it. So you can co-locate your two admin consoles in the same box to administer your child primary sites.
Is supernetting supported?
No. We do not support supernetting, other than the fact that you can do so inside AD. So inside AD, you do your supernetting, then you do the AD boundary as your boundary. But no, not supernetting itself. Do you have?
No, that was a question.
Okay. Cool. All right. Quick little demo on boundaries. Okay, so here's my admin console. You notice there's now a boundaries node. Nothing there by default. Whereas in the old days, that's from 2003, you'd go to your site properties, and then you would have the roaming boundaries and site boundaries here, and you go and configure those. You don't do that anymore. It's now a boundaries node, and there's no boundary set up by default. So by default, nobody's assigned to your site. You remember in SMS 2003, it was the IP subnet of the site server. So you have to go in there and add the boundaries that you want to manage. So here's where you're defining that scope of administration or scope of management for your clients. IP subnet AD site, which very cool. We have a browse button, so you don't have to worry about fat-fingered admins like me mistyping your AD site name and now nobody being assigned. So you just browse to it. It'd be cool if you could browse everywhere in our console. Don't ask me, I had nothing to do with it. Oops. New boundary, I'll add in a VPN. So IP subnet, AD site, IPv6 prefix, and IP address ranges. Those are the 4 type of boundaries. So really what we added was IPv6 support. But an IP subnet, this confuses people. We ask you for the network. The network isn't really what you would think of as a network. So it's not my subnet ID there. The network you put here is your IP address of a client on this boundary. So my client's address would be 192.168.3.25. So that's a sample IP address of this client I'm going to have on my VPN. The subnet mask of that client is this, and then we automatically figure out what to put in for your subnet ID. So if you try and put in a supernetted one, we're going to put in the wrong subnet ID there, so your clients aren't going to be assigned.
Can't you just type in your subnet ID?
Because everybody screwed it up in SMS 2003, because most people didn't know how to do the ANDing properly. So they would put in the wrong one, or they try and do supernetting or subnetting of a subnet, and it never worked. Now this one I would say is slow or unreliable, being a VPN. Now again, the slow versus fast has nothing to do with whether clients are assigned to your site or not. They can be assigned to your site through any boundary, fast boundary or slow boundary. The slow versus fast is for deployments, for software distribution, for software updates or task sequences. Do they get access to this resource or not? That's based off of a fast boundary or slow boundary. Fast boundary, yes. Slow boundary, not by default. And you have to say, yes, slow boundaries get access to these guys as well. And then, of course, you would see all the boundaries here from all your child sites. And it would tell you the site code there in the second column as well. So you know what site may have an overlapping boundary issue. We did not fix overlapping boundaries. Configuration Manager is not going to change overlapping boundaries. I told the team, you guys may disagree with me, but I told the team, if you want to do one thing to make people really happy, you fix overlapping boundaries. So that if I have an overlapping boundary scenario, my client always goes to its default MP. Go to the MP of the site they're assigned to. You do that, it'll make maybe not all you guys, but everybody happy. So that would be one thing you could do to get a lot of customer sat right away. So upgrade, you've got a few slides on upgrade, then we'll cut for a break. Upgrade scenario, in-place upgrade, it's very good if you want to retain your data. If you want to keep the same hardware, keep the same data you have in your environment today, in-place upgrade is the way to go. If you want to swap server hardware, or if you want to start clean, then side-by-side is the way to go. Now, you can still swap server hardware in an in-place upgrade. Personally, I would swap my server hardware first, make sure everything's working with the new hardware, then I would go ahead and do my in-place upgrade. Feature packs, you have to remove all your feature packs before you can do an in-place upgrade. ITMU is not a feature pack, so that doesn't have to be removed, but the device management feature pack, the administrator feature pack, the OS deployment feature packs, you have to remove those feature packs before you can upgrade a site. The prereq checker in an upgrade scenario will validate that you have removed all those feature packs, like the inventory tool for Dell updates, the inventory tool for HP updates, and the IBM inventory tool, and so on. They have to remove all those type things as well. Your packages you would have created with the OSD feature pack and the device management feature pack, they remain and can still be deployed. You can't administer them, but you can still deploy them. Now, there is no upgrade from SMS 2003 OSD images to Configuration Manager OSD images. There's no tool to migrate those, and those are different WIM files. So they're not the same. Configuration Manager cannot modify a SMS 2003 WIM file. Your upgrade is you take the SMS 2003 WIM file, you deploy it, you then make that box a reference system, and you capture it with Configuration Manager. So it's a deploy and recapture process to migrate SMS 2003 images to Configuration Manager images.
There's a database conversion tool checker, is it there, that you run first pass?
Yes. Before you do any upgrade, and I don't have it in this presentation, I've got it in a different presentation. Before you do an upgrade, first thing you do is you run your prereq checker. The prereq checker replaces the DRW, the deployment readiness wizard that you guys know from SMS 2003. That's replaced. That's now the prereq checker. So if I'm in an upgrade scenario, we'll detect that, and we'll run a lot of different tests for an upgrade that we don't do in a clean install environment. So that's the DRW. You run that, and then you do a test database upgrade. So you do a setup/testdb upgrade with a backup copy of your database, not your production copy, a backup copy of your database, and see if your database can be upgraded. So if the prereq checker validates that your site can be upgraded, OS, SQL Server versions, all that kind of good stuff, and the testdb upgrade program validates your database can be upgraded, you should have a pretty good shot when you do your real live upgrade that your site's going to work when it's all done.
Just two things, Wally. ITMU is upgraded post-installation.
If you have ITMU installed on your SMS 2003 site and you do an upgrade, we do upgrade in place ITMU as well. And that is, again, assuming that because you had the ITMU there, you still can have SMS 2003 clients you need to support for a while.
And the final thing is that the testdb upgrade is destructive. So obviously you just said they're taking
Right.
a backup copy.
Correct.
But you're not. So I'm just saying maybe you take a backup copy.
Oh, no, it's not a maybe. If you run testdb upgrade in your production database now has been upgraded to whatever release you're trying to test on. So whether you want to call it destructive or not, it's destructive for the old version of the code. So what that means is your next step is you're now going to upgrade your site server to whatever version, or you're going to do a recovery process to recover your last version of that database that you backed up right before you tried to do your testdb upgrade. So either way you go. So yes. Good points. All good points. Hierarchy considerations, you always have to start top down. So start your central site, work your way down. When we were running the TAP program for V4, we had a lot of customers that had huge hierarchies that couldn't start at the top and work their way down. So they would have to disconnect a branch of the hierarchy out of their hierarchy, make it a separate hierarchy. That would then become our TAP site. We would then upgrade its central site out of that brand new little hierarchy and upgrade the child sites after that. So, but you can't have a configuration manager site reporting to a SMS 2003 site. You can't have a configuration manager SP1 site reporting to a configuration manager RTM site. The higher version always has to be at top. We don't support legacy clients anywhere in your hierarchy. So if you want to try and upgrade your central site, if our prereq checker sees a legacy client in that database, you don't get upgrade. You have to remove every single legacy client from your site, your hierarchy. There is no such thing as a legacy client anymore. The minimum client we support is Windows 2000. And even in SMS 2003, technically, we don't support Windows 98 anymore. We don't support Windows NT 4 as operating systems anymore as Microsoft. So technically, those clients are unsupported if you had them. Here's always run the testdb upgrade prior to your upgrade, which we've already covered that now. Interoperability, SMS 2003 sites can be children of configuration manager. That's fine. SMS 2003 clients can be assigned to a mixed mode configuration manager site. They cannot be assigned to a native mode configuration manager site, but a mixed mode site. Configuration manager clients cannot be assigned to an SMS 2003 site. That's why you either need the configuration manager AD schema or you need a server locator point, which is a configuration manager based SLP. So when you install a configuration manager client, one of the very first things it does is it determines what site code it should be assigned to, which you probably specified in your command line. It validates, is this site code, which I typed in MCM, is MCM a V4 site? We validate that through AD scheme extensions, which aren't in SMS 2003, or a SLP. If we can't validate that, that client will not be assigned to that site. So you cannot assign a V4 client to a SMS 2003 site. You can have SMS 2003 clients assigned to the configuration manager site. Configuration manager clients can roam down to an SMS 2003 site and use the management point or distribution point thereof to get content, but not be assigned to that site. And no SMS 2.0 support anywhere, so you can't have an SMS 2.0 site in your hierarchy. I think we probably hit all these, just different colored slide. SMS 2003 requires an SMS 2003 console. You can co-locate the two. Have to have SMS 2003 console first, then configuration manager console on top. Then you can go ahead and do your then you have both consoles there, but you cannot deinstall the SMS 2003 console nor upgrade it. Deinstall or upgrade would happen on the configuration manager console, so get to where you need to be. No legacy client support or interoperability, no standard security support. I think I mentioned this earlier. You can only upgrade from advanced security, not from standard security. Patch feature level interoperability for SMS 2003 sites and clients. That's the ITMU that Rob was talking about. If you have ITMU in your SMS 2003 site, still there, we'll upgrade to the V4 version of ITMU so that we can create packages and software distribution objects for SMS 2003 clients. And then no SMS 2.0 interoperability at all. Okay, I won't do a summary because we're already way late. So we'll just dispense with those pleasantries. It is 15:02. I guess we're supposed to have a 15-minute break, so 15:17. I'm going to start up with part 2, which is client deployment. And I can pick up right where these guys left off.
Thank you very much, Wally.